Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer brought to you by Forge College. So if you've been following along with our Programming with Solana track, specifically the module on interacting with Solana clients and programs, you'll remember our last lesson. We covered handling client operations and transaction flow, right? We basically learned how to safely isolate building an instruction from actually submitting it. We split up those responsibilities. Well, today, we're taking that exact concept and drawing up the master schematic. We're getting into the foundations of advanced client interaction patterns. Think of this like an engineering blueprint. We're going to see exactly how to sequence, batch, retry, and reconcile results so that your Solana client libraries stay totally rock solid even when network traffic goes absolutely crazy. Okay, here's our schematic for today. First up, we're going beyond basic transactions. Then we'll dive into a couple of really helpful mental models: the mailroom for your prep work, the van for submissions, and the audit for state reconciliation. And finally, we'll put it all together to build your robust pipeline. Let's get into it. Section 1. Beyond basic transactions. So look, you already know how to build an instruction. You know how to sign a transaction. That's the easy part, right? But what actually happens out there in the wild? What happens when the Solana network misbehaves or gets heavily congested? To wrap our heads around this, let's use a mental model. I want you to picture the mailroom versus the delivery van. If you think of your client architecture as two loosely coupled systems, it makes everything so much clearer. The mailroom? That represents your local client buffers. It's safe, it's meticulously organized, and it is 100% under your control. But then, there's the delivery van. That is the Solana RPC network. And let me tell you, it's an unpredictable, chaotic, literally fiery domain full of external factors like latency spikes and strict rate limits. Splitting our architecture into these two distinct worlds is absolutely crucial. It drastically cuts down on our mental overhead when we start drafting up complex retry logic. Moving on to Section 2, the mailroom, prep and batching. All right, let's start inside the nice, safe confines of our first domain. Notice how we're labeling our packages here on the blueprint. Enter the idempotency key. You can think of this as a totally unique tracking step that your very meticulous mailroom clerks slap on every single box. It's usually made up of a user ID, a monotonically increasing sequence number, and a short client-generated nonce. Why do we need this? Well, if the delivery van completely fails and we have to resubmit a package, the on-chain program reads this exact stamp so it doesn't process a duplicated parcel twice. It is the ultimate safety net. It guarantees repeatable submissions without accidentally creating duplicate state transitions on-chain. Now, right alongside that idempotency key, we have what's called a correlation ID. This is a metadata tag attached directly to an operation. Here's the difference. If the idempotency key is for the on-chain program to avoid double processing, the correlation ID is strictly for your own local mailroom to keep its paperwork straight. Make sense? It lets us perfectly link our local client actions with the eventual on-chain results. So when a delivery is finally confirmed out there on the blockchain, this little tag helps us check off the exact corresponding box in our local ledger. So how do our mailroom clerks actually pack these boxes before shipping them out? Well, they use really strict batching strategies. They group things together based on very specific rules. Maybe it's by time, waiting a few milliseconds to see if more orders come in, or maybe by size, capping the box at a certain number of instructions. Notice the engineering efficiency here. By doing this, they preserve perfect per-user ordering, and they actually deduplicate account metadata to squeeze right under the network's strict size limits. All of this happens before the van ever even leaves the garage. Which brings us to Section 3, the van, submissions and retries. Okay, so the packages are all stamped, they're bossed up, loaded in the back, and we are hitting the wildly unpredictable RPC roads, which naturally brings us to a really critical engineering question. What happens when the delivery van just breaks down? Because, spoiler alert, it will. If your client library assumes every single submission is a guaranteed delivery, your application is eventually going to crash and burn. We need a rock-solid strategy for when things go wrong out there. We handle this chaos by actually classifying our breakdowns. First up, we have retriable errors. Think timeouts or transient network drops. In our metaphor, this is just a flat tire. You fix it, and you keep driving the exact same transaction. No big deal. Next, we have deterministic failures, like a hard on-chain instruction error. This means the destination actively rejected the package. Retrying is completely pointless here. And finally, require rebuild errors. A classic example is an expired block hash. In this scenario, the road literally disappeared beneath the van into a black hole. You can't just keep driving. You have to go all the way back to the mailroom, reconstruct the entire transaction with a brand new block hash, and try the whole thing again. Now, to actually execute those retries safely, we use a technique called exponential backoff and jitter. Look, if the RPC node is already overloaded, hammering it with immediate retries is just going to cause a massive digital pileup. It makes things worse. Instead, imagine our delivery van backing up, waiting a progressively longer time, and taking a slightly randomized alternate route. The exponential backoff part increases the wait time with every attempt, while the jitter, that little bit of randomness, ensures that if thousands of clients fail all at once, they don't all try to reconnect at the exact same millisecond and crash the network again.
All right, section 4, the audit, state reconciliation.
So what happens when the van driver simply loses radio contact? We know we sent the package, but we have absolutely no idea if it actually arrived. Here is a massive takeaway for you. A lack of response from the RPC does not equal a failure. It just means silence. This is exactly where reconciliation comes in. It's essentially a lightweight background audit. Instead of blindly trusting the van's spotty radio, our mailroom quietly checks the final destination itself. We verify the actual on-chain state against what our client assumes happened, and then we correct any divergence. But how do we do this without totally destroying our network performance with constant pings? Well, we perform very lightweight, read-only checks using those correlation IDs we set up earlier. If the on-chain state matches what we expect, boom, great, we clear those pending local entries. If it's missing, then we escalate to a manual retry or some sort of compensating action. But listen, this is absolutely crucial. This process must be carefully rate-limited. We really don't want our background audit creating more RPC pressure than our actual live user traffic. It's designed to be a precise, quiet check to keep everything perfectly consistent. And finally, section 5, building your robust pipeline. Let's pull all of these pieces together into one cohesive master blueprint. If we formally map this out, the mailroom is your local buffers and queues. That's your safe place to batch and label without incurring any network costs. Stamping translates directly to your correlation IDs and idempotency keys, which is what enables those repeat safe submissions. The delivery van is your RPC submission logic, a highly unreliable domain that absolutely demands structured retries. And finally, the lost parcel scenario is a dropped confirmation, which requires detection via background reconciliation. Now let's see how this all flows through a concrete 7-stage technical pipeline. So the first 3 stages happen entirely safely inside the mailroom. Stage 1 is ingestion and construction. An event arrives, you build the instructions, and you stamp it with a stable idempotency key and correlation ID. Stage 2 is local queuing and batching. You insert that stamped item into a queue and apply those time or size-based batching rules we talked about. Stage 3 is building transactions. This is where you pack those batched instructions into one or more actual transactions, deduplicate the account metadata to save space, and generate the final signatures. Everything is inked, prepped, and perfectly ready to go. Then we send it out the door. Stage 4 is submit with classified retry. You push the transaction to the RPC and apply that exponential backoff and jitter for any transient errors. Stage 5 is a short confirmation window. You wait for a short commitment level, like confirmed. Now, if you get no response here, you don't panic, you just move right to Stage 6, background reconciliation. Your background audit kicks in and checks the on-chain state to verify the real outcome. And finally, Stage 7 is observability and escalation. You log the timelines, track your retry attempts, and surface alerts to your operators if any discrepancies remain unresolved. This entire workflow gives you a predictable, highly debuggable path from ingestion all the way to final verifiable state. Now, if you take away just one core philosophy from this explainer before drafting any advanced Solana client library, let it be this. Separate your concerns, design your idempotency early so that retries are actually safe, and always, always reconcile your ambiguous outcomes. Seriously, do not make correctness trade-offs just for short-term performance gains. Always verify the ultimate truth on-chain. And that pretty much wraps up our structural foundation. Next up, we're going to evaluate performance trade-offs quantitatively by tuning these exact retry policies in our next lesson on client library optimization techniques. Until then, thank you so much for joining this explainer by Forge College. Be sure to visit forge.college to deep dive into more Web3 topics and continue your programming journey. But I'll leave you with this one question to ponder. If your delivery van drops completely off the grid tomorrow, does your application state survive the silence, or does it blindly send a duplicate package? Keep building, stay curious, and we'll see you in the next one.